Hey everyone, real quick before this video gets started, just a quick reminder to like, comment, and subscribe down below. I read basically every comment and I'm always open to hearing suggestions and new ideas. All that stuff really helps me out a lot with me trying to grow my channel. So yeah, if at any point during the video you find yourself enjoying my content, feel free to subscribe or leave a like. Now with that out of the way, let's get on with the video.
Well, what do we have here? An RTX 3050 XC Ultra from EVGA. Is this the right upgrade for you and your old AMD or Intel system? Let's find out and unbox this, shall we? EVGA does these fancy little serrated things, but I'm just a box cutter kind of person, you know. But it's not necessary for the seal. Alright, so flip it around back, and I'll just go ahead and have it like that. We'll slide everything out. Pretty decent packaging. There's a lot of extra wiggle room in there for the make sure that graphics card in these precious times in the GPU crisis don't go to get damaged. So yeah, seems to be like a little guy. It is bubble wrapped and foam wrapped. So we got double wrapping on this sucker, and he's early in there. Oh, there we go. True EVGA branding. Not that the branding matters. But some background on this card, I actually picked this up at the Newegg Shuffle for MSRP. This is a card over MSRP, but you can find some for the standard retail price if you're lucky. I believe I paid $329 for this 3050, and you can get them for even less than that for $249 if you're lucky in the Newegg Shuffle, depending on what model and stuff you're okay with. But I found this model. This is the only one I could get quick and easy in the shuffle. Was the XC. So we're gonna test this out. It's a very clean card. It's very solidly built. So I'm very happy. This is my first RTX full card I've ever owned. So just gonna try it out, see how it goes, and then hopefully find somebody that's gonna get some good use out of it. So yeah, I'm gonna run over to the test bench right now.
Alright, all games are tested at 1080p on decent quality settings, and first up we have Apex Legends. It's not a game I have much experience in, but on very high settings with a 3050 and Ryzen 5 1600, we're looking at 92 FPS average at 1080p with 54 FPS 1% lows. Very playable. You'd probably want to run this at lower settings to get more FPS since it's a competitive game. If you're looking at the statistics in the top left, you'll notice GPU, MEM, CPU, and RAM usage as well as FPS. For gaming, we're going to be looking at the GPU, CPU, and FPS figures. So with Apex, we're getting 90%, around 90% for GPU usage, which is good. That means we're not getting bottlenecked by the Ryzen 5 here. If it was, we'd see less GPU usage. So the Ryzen 5 and RTX 3050 here are a good pairing. Next, we have one of my personal favorite games, Escape from Tarkov. On my custom high settings for both visual quality and performance, we have an average of 74 FPS with 36 FPS for the 1% lows. Doesn't sound that great, but this is pretty decent performance since Tarkov is very resource intensive. So if you look at our RAM usage, we're looking around 14 gigabytes of our 16 gigabytes total. That's a lot. I played on the customs map for a little bit, which is better optimized than certain other maps. But we're already seeing our RTX 3050 hovering around 70% total usage here, 72, 73, which means it's got more FPS in the tank with a faster CPU and probably better optimization. So we're already seeing some signs of bottlenecking here in this title from the Ryzen 5. So just keep that in mind moving forward. But given this chip, this Ryzen 5 was released in 2017 for around $200, a little bit of history. And that was a 6-core 12-thread chip coming in at $200, and that was absolutely unheard of back in the day. So this was priced the same as an i5 back when i5s were only 4-core and 4-thread. So the fact that this chip has held up for 5 years and is still going strong in 2022, it's kind of commendable. We get into more games that are more demanding, so I'm certain we'll see more of a bottleneck. Now, on to CSGO, we got 168 FPS average and a minimum of 117. My 1% lows got all screwed up, so I'm going off the lowest FPS we ever saw during gameplay. On custom high settings and an online free-for-all, performance is not anywhere where it should be with this card, and that's probably due to the 3.4 gigahertz or 3400 megahertz you see in the corner there of our Ryzen 5 1600. So I definitely can say that the Ryzen 5 1600 is bottlenecking our 3050 here. This game loves single cores running just off of 1 core or 2 with high speeds. So current CPUs, we get upwards of close to 5 gigahertz now. So having a little bit of a bottleneck is definitely playable, but it's an esports game where every frame counts. So a CPU upgrade, something better than the Ryzen 5 1600 would work a little better for us. Next is Destroy All Humans, the PC remake. This is one of my favorite childhood games, but it's been rebuilt in the Unreal game engine. I cannot talk today. So it's been pretty well optimized. We're running at 92 FPS average on max settings at 1080p. Never really see drops below the mid-70s in the middle of action. Still, we're not seeing full usage on the RTX 3050. So that's even more evidence that the Ryzen 5 1600 is not able to keep up with our GPU at this point. Game's very playable, feels great, but you would never know that you're losing out on performance here unless you were monitoring it like I am in the top left. Once again, another CPU would help us get a little more FPS. But it's still very playable on a single player game, very enjoyable. You don't need more for this, but you can get more, if that makes sense. Now on to Elden Ring on high settings. We see an average of 52 FPS with 29 FPS 1% lows while fighting one of the Knight's Cavalry bosses in the rain. This might not be a super demanding area, but Elden Ring in itself is very demanding, and it recommends GTX 1070 if you're wanting to target 60 FPS at 1080p. So performance is close to what you should expect, and 60 FPS is definitely attainable if we drop some of the settings. But I am curious how much extra performance we might get with a CPU, even though our GPU usage is pretty high in the 80s to upper 90s, which is where we definitely want it to be. I know Elden Ring in certain other areas of the game is very demanding, so your FPS may vary depending on where you're located. Next up is the very demanding Jurassic World Evolution 2 on the very high preset. This is on one of my 5-star Chaos Theory parks. So here we're seeing 46 FPS average with a maximum of 64 FPS. So this isn't competitive. This is only single player. So having high FPS is not that important here. We want it to still be very playable and really pretty. So I think we're in that territory. But we did have some drops into the low 30s. So you can definitely feel the game hitching up at times. So I'd recommend dropping some of the settings down here. Keep your textures up. Maybe drop down shadows a little more. It'll make gameplay a little more enjoyable, smoother, but it still will look really pretty. The 3050 here is under a lot of stress. I mean, we're seeing 99% usage here, so it's maxing this thing out, and we're only pulling a little over 100 watts. So it just shows how power efficient this card is. Thermals look wonderful, not going above 55, 56. I haven't seen it hit 6 degrees Celsius, so that's really commendable on how good the job the cooler is doing, and honestly, it just shows how efficient this card is, and it's really overkill how much cooler is on this EVGA card, given that this is a more premium model, so they put a bigger cooler on it. So this is a really appropriate card for Jurassic World Evolution 2, really appropriate CPU pairing with this card. I mean, it works really well, and other GPU heavy titles that focus mostly on the visuals, a Ryzen 5 1600 is enough. Probably could get more, but we'll move on to the next game. So, in Monster Hunter World on custom high settings, we see the Ryzen 5 and 3050 output 76 FPS on average here, running around in Stera, where there's some very high CPU usage. I mean, we're getting upwards of 70, 75 there, 74, 70, 77. I mean, it's spiking pretty high. So our Ryzen 5 1600, that older first gen Ryzen chip, is definitely seeing some stress here. But Monster Hunter World was released around the same time the Ryzen series was new. So it makes sense why this CPU from 2017 does so well in a game from 2018. I mean, Monster Hunter World recommends a 1060 for 30 FPS on high settings. So with the 3050 here, we're basically doubling our recommended specs. Really good performance. I can't have any complaints. I know this is definitely the more CPU heavy part of the game, is just all of the AI and stuff moving around here. During gameplay, I think it get a little more GPU heavy, but it still stay really steady, I believe, throughout. So the 3050 here is plenty for Monster Hunter World. Could definitely play with the settings some, tune it down a little bit, and make it even better, but it's really good. So, moving on to No Man's Sky on high settings, you might see a little bit of stutter, and that's because our Ryzen 5 can deliver 64 FPS on average, but with a 1% low figure of 2 FPS. Yeah, that's 2. I don't know if it's just the game, but I know there's a lot of procedural generation that goes on, which may cause extra CPU stress. And gameplay is pretty smooth, but we're seeing a lot of micro stuttering. If you look at the line graph in the top left, it looks kind of like a heartbeat monitor. You'll see flat lines and then big spikes. Those big spikes are showing how much stutter our game is experiencing, even if we aren't noticing it. But a lot of the stutter here is noticeable. Again, this might just be No Man's Sky or some graphic settings that can be tuned. I'm just trying to run everything, same settings across the board on any tests I do to just show you where the performance differential may be coming from. Would be interesting to see if this was repeated with a more modern chip versus the Ryzen 5 1600. Game's beautiful, very playable, but it does have a little bit of drawback with the stutter. All right, closing out our benchmarks is my most played game on Steam, Rust. Rust is not the most optimized game. It can be a resources hog, and it heavily favors single core usage and clock speeds. So we see 51 FPS on average here and a 19 FPS 1% low on my custom very high settings. This will definitely require more PS to play the game competitively, since it's an open world survival MMO, which is likely attainable if we drop some of the settings down. But I like my graphics pretty, and I'm going to be running any testing I do at these settings locked in, so it's a fair comparison across the board. Yeah, I mean, I like my graphics pretty. That's one of the main reasons I got into PC gaming. So it's very playable on this setup if you drop your settings, but if you're wanting to play it and get everything out of your GPU, especially an RTX 3050, it's not cutting it. I mean, we're only seeing between 40 up to 60, 70% usage. So I'm fairly confident our FPS here is being limited by those 3.4 gigahertz clock speeds. I mean, we really should be pushing over 70 FPS on average here, so a new CPU would definitely help us max out the RTX 3050 as it should in this game, where every frame counts. So, throughout this video, I've been mentioning how a better CPU might get us more FPS. Well, I plan on making a follow-up video where I'm upgrading this B350 board to the new BIOS to support the super affordable Ryzen 5 5500. It's another 6-core, 12-thread Ryzen chip, but that's the most current generation we have from AMD on the AM4 socket. So we'll find out just how much of a performance bump that CPU can provide if you're still running a Ryzen 5 1600 or any first-gen Ryzen chip for that matter. Like in this video, where it's just not able to keep up with the 3050, and that's the cheapest RTX option we have from NVIDIA at this time. So it just might be a perfect, affordable pairing if you're looking to buy something or just maybe upgrade your current platform in 2022. All right, thanks for making it to the end of this video. If there's any games you want tested in my comparisons or any other ideas you may have, leave a comment below. Also, hit like and stay subscribed for more hardware comparisons, benchmarks, PC builds, and gaming content. A quick plug, my website is also semi-finished, so you can check that out at rockspcs.com. That's rockspcs.com. I should have a link in the description. This has been the Rockness Monster. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.